remixing one of the 6 scenes created by Dreamlords. Uh, I'm gonna start with the theater scene. So the first thing you'll notice about these scenes is that they have a very low file size and fairly low um, requirements in terms of poly count, materials, textures. Um, in this scene, though, they do use a lot of lights. It's something to be aware of on the performance check is that this is really um, for mobile handsets that are maybe 3 to 4 years old. So even if you go into the mediums and highs for this performance check, they would still work on desktop and most modern handsets. And the only thing to really be concerned about here is textures, because, and this is only for VR, anything more than 512 may run into problems. So the first thing I will usually do is look at the lighting. And if you press shift, you can choose all the lights. So I'm going to look for spotlights and point lights that they put in the scene. And then usually I'll just group these and rename them lighting so I can adjust them easier. And any groups will appear at the bottom of your hierarchy. So here we go. Then what I'll usually do is turn them all off and then turn them on one by one, just to see where they are. Now the point lights, there's here's another thing that I usually do is I turn off the toggle snap mode so that I can move these freely, uh, move the elements freely. Otherwise, they snap to grid. So, but then you can also adjust that through this, and you can see that on the grid. We can move this in tighter increments, but I usually just turn it off. Um, Now you can put the point lights in front of your model, so it looks like it's lit. But what I like to do is I like to put it inside the model, so it looks it softens it up, it makes it a little more realistic. Now um, you're able to change the color of these lights, and you can adjust the intensity. But since this is a theater scene, I'm going to go with something a little bit um, softer, since I can't remember what the value of the color of this light is. I'll just go back to another point light and copy that information and then bring it back in here. And then I'll just do that with the rest of the lights, but actually there's an easier way. Since this is all on the same coordinate, I will just delete the other lights and then copy this one. You can do that easily with Control D or right click to duplicate. So I'll just go in here and duplicate this light. Sometimes you have to kind of move it around before it duplicates. There we go. And I'll just move those over one by one. I mean, you can do a lot just by adjusting the lighting of a scene to make it unique. So already it looks a whole lot better. I think the screen might be a little too far. What you can do is like go into the position of a spectator, and you can see that maybe the screen is a little too far, especially from the back row. So what I'm going to want to do is cut out a bunch of this space. I don't really need these elements, so I'm going to turn them off for now, just in case I want to bring them back. And then I am going to choose these elements. Let's stand forward. Oops. Let's try that again. There you go. All right. So now we can actually save on some polygons and file size if we remove those elements that are currently being blocked. So I'm just going to delete those out of the scene completely. And now we have a much cozier theater. We can actually enlarge this screen. Right now the scaling is locked, but you can unlink that and then adjust the different coordinates separately. So we're just going to raise this up. Nice. Okay, so even from the back, that should look pretty good. Whoops. Now, since this is a theater, we actually don't need too many lights on. So what I'm going to do is I'll take this middle point light. Also, if they ever get a little sticky, they'll maybe jump out too far. You can always use the transform property. And so with that in mind, I am going to get rid of these lights. Now we're going to stick in some models from Sketchfab to make this a little more realistic. So we need some speakers and something you're always going to want to add for the editor is to put in low poly, or sometimes low. Just putting in low is good enough. Um, so this is a decent looking speaker. We're gonna scale that. So here's another thing I can show you while we're doing this. Up here at the top, you have these tools in the navigation. This one obviously allows you to move the object. This one will allow you to rotate. And then this one will allow you to scale it. So let me just go back to those changes. And I'm going to scale it through the properties dialog. You can also, to turn the model in 90-degree increments, you can use Q and E, which is what I'm doing here. And we want those on the wall. Just gonna copy that, rotate it, and then drag it to the other side. Okay, cool. I think these seats are a little too far and maybe a little too low. So I'm just gonna copy all that and move them up on this platform. Now I'm gonna add the platform in and move all that up. Back a little bit, and then raise it up. Okay, so you'll see that we have this this stair step on this platform. So what we can do is replicate these bits, raise it up, and then back. You know what, for now, let me just raise up the skybox lighting so we can have a little easier time working. So I'm gonna just eyeball it. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe raise it up a tiny bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna want this portion to meet it. Now you see there's this stair step here. Let's see if we can match those up. Okay, so that doesn't look so great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the platform by itself, and I'm just going to rotate it. So then we don't have that restriction. Yep, I think that looks okay. Maybe too far. Let's go back. Let me just confirm that these are actually on the ground. Okay, I think that looks okay. So I'm just going to move these chairs back a bit. So now we have this big space in the back. It looks like these lights are going to get cut off, so I'm going to delete those. Go back to point lights. So one thing you should be doing is naming everything properly, so so that you can find it easily. Okay, so we're just going to take these bits and move those up, move those forward. Now this looks a little uneven, so let's do this. Let's take these pieces, and I'll do the same on the other side. Just to give it some symmetry. And that should be reflected on the other side as well. So then obviously we have to move this over. And I have to just adjust the point lights again. Okay. Okay, so far so good. Now I'm going to show you how to use Meshy to customize things a bit. So one thing you want to do is create a scene and just name it something like GLB export. And I am going to want to recreate this couch. So the other template, there's actually a 7th template created by Dreamlords, and this template, this scene template, actually has all the assets that you can use. So all the textures in this collection were done for optimization to keep them as low as possible, right? So for example, if I wanted to change this platform in the back into, or let's say this one in the front to wood, I would just go to this asset room choose this platform, copy the URL, go back to the scene and drop in that URL. So that I can make those changes. But I'm gonna go back on that. But I want to change this couch. So I go to my GLB export, and I've actually recreated that couch with pieces from this asset room. So just to show you as an example, I would drop in a model and then go to the asset room and say, take this beanbag, copy the URL, and then replace that default model. And there it is. But I'm actually going to disable these things that are in the scene. So one thing to be aware of is right now I'm using a ground plane, and this will be included in the model when you export it. So I use this ground plane just so I have some color underneath. It's just easier to work with when, as opposed to there being nothing there. But it's up to you. You don't necessarily need it. But if you do use a ground plane, just make sure to disable it before you export. So now that I've built my couch, and I can build this any way I want, I can take out pieces, rotate things. If I wanted to build something really strange. All right, you get the idea. So now I'm just going to export this, make sure these are all checked. And then we'll call that a lounger. And then I'm going to go into Meshy. Meshy is a great service to retexture any 3D objects. So first I'm going to import the model that we just created. And then I'm just going to use the original UV. So here's our lounger, and how do I want this to look? Let's just say red velvet, plush, sofa, or lounger. Okay, so while this is running, I'm going to go back, and I want to change these walls as well. I'm looking for something a little more ornamental. So let's do this. Let's look up. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Now I'm just going to save this image. We'll get back to that later, but first, I'm going to go back to our exporter scene. Let's hide this sofa. Let's bring back this thing. Now I'm going to take one of the walls. It doesn't matter which one. I'll just choose this white one for now. Copy that and replace. Now we have our wall. Just going to export that. I've done a few walls, so let's just name that wall 2. And we'll bring that into here. Okay, while this lounger is still working, I'm going to texture this one and try to get as close to that other image that we just searched up. So you can go into the image go to the text input. Actually, let's do both. First, we're going to try with an image, and I'm just uploading that image we previously downloaded. And then I'm just going to prep this in the meantime to see what kind of result we get. We can take that same image and have it described uh, by their AI. I'm just going to generate prompt. And make some edits. But just adjust this a bit. Let's take out gradient because the gradient will kind of be done by the lighting within the scene. And I can take this part out. Let's see what that looks like. So once this is done, we'll try it with the text input. So in the meantime, now I want to have some contrast. So what I'm going to do is grab the URL of black seat, the black recliner. I'm just going to replace these. Just want to see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to do the same for all. Oh, while we're waiting for those texturing things to happen, the one thing we can do is go into elements and use a media frame. Now you can embed a video into the scene if you want, but I like these media frames because this will allow you to share screen or your webcam while you're live in the room, and you can stick it in these media frames. Oops. Let's undo that. Spin it up. Now, the part that is important about the media frame is this middle part, because that's where your video is going to show. But the frame is an indication of where of the area you can toss your media into. And I'll demonstrate that once we actually publish this room and go into it. But right now you can see that, like, yeah, the screen part is a bit far from the actual screen, so we'll just try to fit that in a little closer. Now what we can do is make this really thin so we can see a bit more properly what this will look like. But this means that when you want to put media into it, you're going to have to be very close. Okay, that's good enough. Another thing we can do is let's stick an exit to another scene. So I've already searched for exit PNGs, and I'll just grab this one. Now, since this is a PNG with a transparent background, I'm going to go into transparency mode of the image and just click blend. And now the transparency is enabled. I'm going to take another one of our room URLs. So if I want people to exit into another scene, I'll just add that here. And so these people who leave this scene will be sent out into Basetown. Let's see if our texturing is done. Okay, that's an odd one. Let's try that again with so to replace our couch, we're just going to download the file, make sure it's GLB, and just name it so you can find it easily. Red. Go back, and I'm just going to get rid of all of this. Then you're going to go to My Assets and upload your file. Let's just delete these assets. Okay, so Meshy always returns the objects a little smaller, so you're just gonna have to scale those up. The size. Okay. Now, once I bring down the lights, that should look pretty cool. Nice. So while we're waiting, maybe something else we can do is just add a little bit more ambiance by adding, let's look at the previous lighting. So here we'll just bring in the lighting from the original scene. Identify where those lights are. We definitely don't want that one. Alright, this one in the back. Maybe we can use this one. See, this one, let's drop this down. Let's make it really a spotlight. Make it wider. Go back to meshes, see if our wall is done. Alright, let's give this one a try. So now what I want to do is replace these walls. Um, Before that, I just want to show you something. Like, you don't have to be so exact about your build, right? Like, this is pretty messy. Um, but no one's going to see this stuff. You may want to, you know, remove some unnecessary objects just to save on some poly. Although, like I said, uh, this is a pretty efficient scene. But it's always good to remove what you don't need. So, okay. Because I moved the wall in, this spawn point is no longer valid, so I need to move that guy in. Let's see. So this is where a user will spawn in. So let's just put him there. And I want to change these walls, right? For now, I'll just disable them in case I want to bring them back. Or actually, let's upload the wall. Going to grab the URL. Let's get that out of the scene. Wait. Let's place that. Got that. No worries. Let's just rotate that up. 180. Rotate it. Yeah. So the reason I'm using one side as opposed to the other is because Meshy generated this weird artifact on one side, so I'm just going to use the other side. And yeah, it's strange, but it's kind of cool. So now I'll just do the same on the other end. I'm actually just going to get rid of that wall and then duplicate this one. Now remember, we have that weird thing on this side, so rotate that. So let's just make sure that looks lined up. There you go. One thing you can do to test the scene is go into developer and make sure that this is enabled, because then you can just press this preview scene to see what it's going to look like. Just be aware that you need to turn it off to manipulate any items. Okay, so let's publish that. Hold on, just saw something. Now, you know what? Actually, I kind of like that. Where we're hiding the base of this lamp. You know what? Let's do that. Now we publish. Let's call this the green room. So this is not bad. This is pretty good actually. It's very low. This will show up on a mobile handset. No problem. Alright, the last thing we need to do is to make these seats clickable so that people can actually sit in them. Um, so we're just going to stick the waypoints in here. You want to put their butt a little bit within the seat. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think for this scene I want to make it a spawn point. So that means um, when they access the link and they join the scene, they will already be seated. So this can be occupied and it is clickable. I don't really want to touch. I want you to be able to move around. I want you to be able to teleport out of it. Not really concerned with snap to floor. And I don't want you to maintain your original position. I want to be able to direct where you're facing when you enter that waypoint. And I want you to be facing the screen. So I'm just going to duplicate this guy, stick them in all of the seats. Just make sure they're in the middle. Then I'm going to duplicate this entire row. Bring it up to the next row. Take those guys, stick them on the couch. I may have to make some adjustment on the couch. This is actually fine, but let's just move these guys a little bit out. So now you can kind of go and see what this scene is going to look like from their perspective. Okay, now let's publish it. Follow the green room. Okay, so I can already tell that um, that our thumbnail isn't going to be great because I didn't adjust the preview camera. So before we create a room, let's do this. This is your room preview camera. You'll see it was okay before, but since I moved the wall and screen in, it's now outside. So there's a couple ways that you can manipulate this like any other element. But a much easier way to do it is just find how you want this room what the thumbnail to look like. Um, make sure you have scene preview camera. You have that chosen in the hierarchy, and then set from viewport. And this is what your thumbnail is going to look like. If I want to go from the other perspective, just do that. And we're going to republish the scene. And now you see I have a good thumbnail. And I see that that has changed from the previous. So let's create a room. So as I showed you before, I entered in on one of the waypoints. And just by pressing space, I can enter a seat, change that seat. And then if I wanted to show something, let me just load something on YouTube. Or just YouTube itself. Um, and then I'm just going to share screen or webcam. Let's share that. Okay, now I can see that the media frame, since there's no indication on the frame itself on the orientation, I can see that it's reversed. So no problem. Let's just go back to our scene and fix that. Now the great thing about these scenes being so uh, the file size being so low is that it publishes fairly quickly. So just a minute or two, and then we can go back in and see that. There you go. So, because this is a screen share, I can really change that to anything I want. And because I have this exit linked to another scene, we are now in base 10. So I hope this was helpful.